Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 2 of the anime series Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, another spectacular, engrossing episode. And let me get it out of the way right away. If there was any confusion to my fellow viewers as to the length of this episode dropping by half of what we got for the pilot episode, the first episode at a full 50 minutes, I was actually given the heads up in the discussion, the comment section on my episode 1 discussion video from YouTube user Ihoba, letting me know that apparently the first episode, for all intents and purposes, was taken from the first 2 DVD releases or whatever, and it was actually a full 70 minutes in length, but it had been, compressed down a little bit to 50 minutes for its televised airing, and that's effectively what we got. So I'm sure there's some missing bits and bobs, details, and things like that, if you're fortunate enough to be living in Japan, being able to pick up these DVDs, you might have more insights on and everything like that. As well as I got to give props to YouTube user The Cuppy Cake Delight, I believe, who answered my question as to whether Yotaro actually had a real name, if we'd ever find that out. His name is Kyoji and everything like that. And also give props to my good friend Dana, who let me know that I'd actually misinterpreted the performance, the Rakugo performance that Yotaro had put on, was actually known as Dekegoro, rather than, Shinigami, which was what Yakumo had performed. I had made the assumption that they all were performing the same Rakugo Shinigami. But getting on to this episode, it's 24 minutes in length, and this is apparently the length proper for the remainder of the series, not as to my assumption that we'd get 50 minutes every week. But nothing was lost in translation for it. I mean, it was still a very thoroughly, as I say, engrossing episode, and very much stemming off on that promise we left off with toward the end of the first episode, that Yakumo would be relating the story about how he effectively came to meet Sugoroku, and how that burgeoning adversarial relationship dynamic, whatever you wanted to, refer to it as, how that all came to pass. And it's quite tragic. I mean, we're looking at the lives of these 2 young men who are, for all intents and purposes, abandoned to the world. They're left to their own devices. And I really was heavily reminded of almost like an alternate universe, decades later, or centuries later, Samurai Champloo effect, where effectively you had, Sugoroku, aka Shin, being very much the boisterous, impetuous, Mugen-esque character, whereas you had Yakumo, aka Bon, being very much the Jin, straight-laced, very calm, very reserved character. And I loved that dynamic from right off the bat. I mean, you already see hints and whispers to this effect all throughout the course of the first episode. And it's that much more interesting to go back and sort of relook at, the first episode in Yakumo's reaction to Yotaro, because of how closely knit in form and function and style and the way he carries himself, and his actual, passion to study this Rakugo art form, how closely relatable to Sugoroku he is. And it also goes that much further into explaining why he seems much more well adaptable to Sugoroku's style of Rakugo performance. And so I love the depth that this gives in everything we've already bore witness to in the first episode, but much more, that much more, in the lives of Yakumo and Sugoroku, respectively. I thoroughly love how they come together in their both having suffered losses, and, there's this level of, Shin being there for Bon. I'm going to refer to them as their younger names, younger nicknames, or whatever you want to call it, because I just think they're so but you basically have Shin kind of inadvertently putting his arm around Bon when they're in the bathhouse, and Bon is crying. It's just the realization, the heavy weight of that leg injury that has made him incapable of performing dance. And I think there's some level of humming or musical melodic singing, that kind of thing, that's supposed to go along with it. But how much his family feels, like a lack of honor, like a sense of dishonor for having a child who's meant to be doing this in geisha houses to begin with. But then he falters, and he can no longer rise to that challenge because of his injury, and they kind of just pass him off. They're abandoning him to this master Rakugo artist who is looking to take in apprentices. The whole thing is kind of funny because his wife is riding him. I didn't want any kids to be taken in to begin with, and they get taken in 2, to study this art form. But I really love that idea of heritage and passing on this art form from generation to generation. That's very much the sense we were left with by the end of the first episode between Yakumo and Yotaro respectively. And that's very much what this, Rakugo master wants to do. He wants to pass on the lineage of this art form to another generation. And I love how just chomping at the bit Shin is, as we see. He's got such a natural talent to it, but it's through mimicry. And again, the parallels between he and Yotaro in the first episode are astounding to me along those lines. How similar they are and how adaptable they are to the material. And as we see, there are two full Rakugo performances. They're meant to be the headliners to this, aged, sort of wisdom-beladen Rakugo performer. And, it kind of jumps time a little bit, skips ahead a little bit through the course of their studying this art form. But each of the pieces they perform are very much well characterized to who they are as characters. I mean, the performance that Bon puts on is like, talking about this guy who doesn't really understand social, conveniences and appliances, how to compliment people on the street and that kind of thing, and misinterpreting this advice he's given so that he's actually being more insulting and just unlikable. And that's really what is embodied in Bon's performance. He really comes across as boring and unlikable. That music is constantly etching up notch by notch, louder and louder, to really, become poignant to that idea that this is a grotesque failure for Bon. A man who, as we see in episode 1, he has become, by that elder age, as, the performer Yakumo, he's become somebody who draws in so many crowds, and he is this masterwork performer. So it's a very interesting contrast to see that at the start, he held no interest for it. It was just something he fell back on because what else was there? He just had to put up with it. He didn't even really care for it. He had no passion for it. Very different from the evolved version of this person we would meet in episode 1, who was very much like the Rakugo masterwork in his childhood, who held this work in such high regard, who became so passionate about it. And we see that it's an extension not only of a love and a fascination for the performance art in and of itself, but it's also the relationship that was born between he and Sugoroku back in the past. And then, of course, when he is sort of unceremoniously ushered off stage and you have Shin going up and doing his performance, from right off the bat, he grabs the attention of the audience. He yells, hey, he's very much in his performance embodying this salesman, this car salesman kind of aesthetic where I got to draw people in. I got to wheel them and deal them. I got to seem like, this fast talking, fast paced, really likable personality. And that's kind of, Shin's personality anyway. So he really speaks to his natural talents, as I say. And so both of these performances are well embodied to the characterization of each of these different characters. Even as spoken by the Rakugo master, how stark they are. They're like day and night. One is doom and gloom, one is happy, and vice versa whenever they shift their moods and everything like that. And it's just absolutely captivating because we are able to perceive as this episode ends the influences that Sugoroku must have had on Yakumo. Even though Yakumo held to his own sort of subdued, reserved style, he became that master performer. And I love how you see the contrast in the performance of old as opposed to the one we saw in the first episode, where it was thoroughly captivating. And even with the music amping up in this second episode where he fails miserably, you're seeing not only embodied by that music, but in the performance itself, how bad it is, how shaken he is, how unmotivated he is. He's trying, I think, he's trying his best to put forth as good a performance as he can, but he knows it's a lost cause. And so, all told, I just thoroughly loved being able to become more familiar with these characters, see how much of their resounding relationship left off on each other by the end of the episode. And I hope we will continue more of this exploration. As much as I want to get back to the present and see Yotaro, succeed in mastering this craft for his own, I'm just thoroughly engrossed in finding out more about this foundation, especially between Shin and Bon. Shin and Bon, I'm thinking Sin and Bon. Shin and Bon, Sugoroku Yakumo respectively, just a fantastic series, fantastic pacing, engrossing characters, engrossing, sort of investigation into this art form that I had never heard of. But again, it's very much a one-man stage performance, anecdotal storytelling thing. And I just find it so captivating. It's something from yesteryear, from the ye olde sense of the world, where it's like, I'm sure it exists out there somewhere, but as I was alluding to in my, episode 1, First Impressions video, it's more along the lines of something you'd see on YouTube or you'd go online to find. I mean, people were flocking back in the day, back in Yakumo's day, even as a sort of elderman performer. They were flocking out to see him because of his world-renowned sense of being this, masterwork performer, as akin to we would go out and see Star Wars The Force Awakens. And so for this art form to, succeed the generations, and for there to be such a passion in these characters to learn it and master it and carry it on to further future generations, it has me that much more invested in wanting to learn about it, wanting to learn about them, the individuals who find it such a captivating performance art and everything like that. Stellar episode, stellar show thus far. Can't wait to see where the story goes from here. And yeah, I couldn't say more highly regarded words about it. Superlatives aplenty from this end. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen episode 2 of Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, if you're digging it as much as I am, and as captivated with it as I am. If not, why not? Let me know in the comments below. Love having that conversation, even if our POVs happen to disagree. If you don't happen to be finding this at all interesting, let me know why. Let me know your thoughts on it. So, yeah, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.